Corporate Finance Core Topic 3, DCF, Debt, and VBA, Learning Objective number 4, Value Bonds and Compute Yields. So let's talk about bonds. So a bond is basically just a loan, just like your mortgage. However, the bonds typically make no principal payments. They're not amortizing. So there's no principal payments until maturity, so it looks like an interest-only loan. And usually corporate bonds have semi-annual payments. So in finance jargon, we say they have a payment frequency of 2, make 2 payments per year. There's also some other jargon. The par, also called the principal or face value, is the amount paid at maturity and is also used to compute the periodic interest payments. Now the periodic interest payments is going to be that par, aka principal or face value, divided by the frequency, in this case 2, times the par, and at maturity, the corporation will pay the par amount and the last interest payment. So here's an example here of a $100,000 par, 5-year, 5% annual coupon rate, semi-annual payment loan. Now the annual coupon rate is really kind of the same thing as the APR that we talked about when we talk about mortgages, the annual percentage rate, or talk about car loans, annual percentage rate. However, for loans, they call them the annual coupon rate. So we're going to look at an example of the cash flows for the corporation that issues this $100,000 loan. And let's pretend they issue it, they receive their $100,000, they use that to fund their CapEx or whatever they're going to do. Let's look at the payments they're going to have to make. So I'm going to go to the spreadsheet, go to my bond. So this is a 5-year semi-annual coupon bond. So these are 10 periods. Each period is 6 months. So at the end of the first 6-month period, you start at the balance of $100,000. Now the interest payment that you have to send to the bondholder is going to be the annual coupon rate, kind of like the APR, divided by the frequency. So if I take my annual coupon rate, divide it by 2, the actual rate per period is 2.5%. So I'm going to send $2.5 to $2,500 to the bondholder. There's no principal payment, so I still owe $100,000. At the end of the 10th year, I still owe $100,000 because I've only paid interest, and I'm going to pay back my principal of $100,000, and then the bond is paid off. So notice this is called non-amortizing or interest only because there's no principal payments until maturity. And let's look at another example here, looking at cash flows. In this example, you see that since interest is tax deductible, in other words, corporations could show that as an expense, that's going to reduce their tax bill. Effectively, the corporation is only paying 3% interest, the after-tax rate, which would be the 5% times 1 minus the tax rate. So from the corporation's perspective, yes, they pay $2,500 in interest, but if I take that interest expense times 1 minus the tax rate, it's only $1,500, right? So the difference there is the savings in taxes. And so effectively the net cash flow for the corporation is not $2,500, it's $1,500. And so therefore you can calculate that that's an effective interest rate of 3% per year. And let's just do a couple more things with bonds. So what if they set up this bond, go to investors and say, hey, we have a $100,000 par bond. I'm going to pay $100,000. I'm going to pay you 5% annual coupon rate for 6 months. And then it goes to the marketplace and they try to sell it. However, it only sells for $99,000. So when the corporation sells the bond, they receive $99,000, not $100,000. So if I look at pre-tax cash flows, the corporation doesn't receive $99,000. I'm sorry, they don't receive $100,000. They receive $99,000. They still pay all their interest and the final coupon and par. So what effective interest rate did they actually pay on their $99,000 loan? Well, let's go and calculate something called yield. So in VBA, in Excel, there's a yield function. And so under settlement, I just put in a settlement date of say 1/1/2017. Maturity date 1/1/2022, 5 years later. Rate is the annual coupon rate. Price Now, here's where it gets a little confusing. If I click on price, PR is the securities price per $100 par value or face value. So this bond has a $100,000 face, all right, or just say when they sold it for $99,000. The face was 100, so they sold it for 99% of par. So this PR inside the yield function is always going to be a number close to 100. It's not going to be a number, say, close to 100,000 or a million. So I'm going to put in 99. Also in this function, there's something called redemption. Redemption is what percentage of par the corporation pays at maturity. You will always put 100 there. And frequency is the number of payments per year, 2. And that's it. So in this example, this returns a yield of 5.23%. That's because the corporation is paying about 5% interest based on $100,000, but only received $99,000. So effectively, they're paying 5.23% on their $99,000 loan. And if we look at one more example, what if we wanted to calculate another type of analysis? What price will investors pay, and how much proceeds will the firm receive if the investors want a 5.5% return? So again, this bond is a $100,000 bond, meaning that the par amount the final payment is going to be $100,000, and it's going to give you 5% interest per period. So what if investors demand a 5.5% YTM? Let's go to or 5.5% return, and we're going to go to the price function. And if I put in here my settlement date and maturity date 5 years later, I put in the annual coupon rate of 5%, and I put in the yield of 5.5%, redemption of 100, frequency of 2. So again, let's think about the inputs. This is a 5-year bond that pays 5%. However, the yield, the investors actually want to yield 5.5%. The only way you can yield 5.5% is if they only pay 97.84% of the par. So in other words, the investors will pay you $97,839. They will then get all the payments that look like these, and effectively they will get a 5.5% return. And by the way, what if the investment bank charges 3% to issue this bond for the corporation? The corporation won't even get the $97,000. They're going to get $94,904. All right, so that was some bond calculations. Let's just talk about bond characteristics. Now, a firm may offer special bond terms to reduce the overall cost. In other words, get investors to maybe pay a higher price. So some of these characteristics are listed here. They could have seniority status. So some bonds may be called senior secured, and meaning that there's senior, meaning that in bankruptcy, these are bondholders will be paid first. And it could be secured, meaning that also the bond is secured by a particular piece of, say, real estate. So it's not so if the corporation were to go bankrupt, the actual piece of real estate or whatever it is securitizes that bond. So you can have senior secured, which would be the highest quality bonds that would get the highest price and demand the lowest rate of return, lowest YTM. You could have senior unsecured, so it's not secured, but it gets paid first. You have subordinate, junior subordinated bonds. So these are kind of the last that get paid and unsecured. However, corporations could get a third-party guarantee, so they could issue, say, a bond and then get another company to guarantee the payment in case of bankruptcy. So these are things that you can do to get a better price for your bond. Make them senior, secured, or get third-party guarantees or insurance. You can make them amortizing. All else equal, I'd rather have an amortizing bond than one that doesn't amortize, because I'm getting my money back earlier and there's a little less risk of not getting that final par payment. I can make the bonds puttable or callable. So a puttable bond is the investor may sell the bond back to the issuer before maturity. So the investor has an option that even though it's a 5-year bond, has a face value of $100,000, after 1 year you might say, you know, I changed my mind. Here's your bond. Give me my $100,000 back. Forget about the future interest. All right, so that would make the bond more valuable because you're giving an option to the investor. However, you can make the bonds callable, which is not too attractive to the investor, meaning the corporation could decide, hey, give me your bond back. I want to give you the par back. We changed our mind. We don't need the money. You could also make them floating rate bonds. So you could have the bonds tied to, say, some index of interest rates. And you could have zero coupon bonds that pay no interest, simply pay all principal back at maturity. So that really looks like an